everybody. It is Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I am your host, Greg Furlong, and with me is Jamie Uyama. Jamie, I think we've had better Mondays, I think, with
I'd say, yeah.
the Notre Dame football program. Not great news to start. Let's start out with the first of all, thank you everyone for tuning in. If you're tuning in now, you're tuning in live, or you're going to watch it later, thank you for tuning into the show. If you like what you see, as always, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, get us out there to more people. We have a lot to talk about. Jamie, why don't we lead off with the news that Tyler Buchner is not going to be Notre Dame's quarterback in 2022 anymore. He had what Marcus Freeman called a grade 5 AC separation. I did not know the grades were they went up to 6 apparently. I did not know that. Turn the light. Okay, so he's going to have surgery and he's going to be out for 4 months, which is too long for the Notre Dame football season. First of all, that's terrible news for Tyler Buchner. Obviously, he was going to be Notre Dame's starting quarterback. It was supposed to be the start of his kind of Notre Dame career. The plan was for him to at least be the quarterback through this season and probably into next, and that is in jeopardy right now. Comments on that?
I mean, obviously, yeah, you're devastated for him. It's an unfortunate injury. It's like I know a lot of people were saying like, oh, that's why they can't run him, and that's what I'm like. The very similar injury happened to Quinn Ewers.
Yeah,
you know. And
it is the same injury, just a different degree.
Yeah, it's just a different degree, right? So it's just, I mean, and he ran a bunch last year and it didn't happen, right? So it's just one of those things that it's just how he fell and the weight of the other person on him. And it's just, that's going to happen. It's football, right? So, I mean, in saying that, this guy's had horrible luck. He obviously, missed his sophomore season because he tore his ACL in high school. Missed his senior season because he, there was a pandemic and California played later and then he decided to enroll early. So I mean, it's not quite Sean Crawford territory, but it's kind of not far off, right? In terms of just his poor luck with it. So you just feel horrible for him. You feel horrible for the team because I really think that, despite his struggles early, I think there's still like a very high ceiling for him and what he can do. And I think, probably the best way for Notre Dame to be the best it can be on offense was to kind of lean into his skill set. And now they can't do that anymore. And that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, especially because I think what Notre Dame learned that they need to do coming out of this game is something that Tyler Buchner would have been very excellent at. And he's not the one who's going to be able to do those things. Obviously, there's kind of been a big debate about, who should be Notre Dame's quarterback at this point. Jim Driscoll's in the chat saying they have to play Angeli. I understand that the urge to say that for everyone because first of all, Pine came in and didn't look particularly good. So there's that part of it. He didn't look good in the spring game. And I would say he looked better last year when he played, when he stepped in
better
against Wisconsin and he stepped in against Cincinnati, which I think those are two defenses that are of higher quality than he's going to face, at least in the, up until they get to BYU, which is in October. So he's played two of the tougher defenses that Notre Dame's seen in the last 2 years. I do agree with Chris Jenkins that he needs more practice reps. And I think Marcus Freeman hit the right note as far as like, you can't bring him off scout team. And then it's like, okay, now you're starting, right? That's not fair to Steve Angeli. That's not setting him up for success. That's not setting the team up for success. Like, look, Drew Pine, he's been the backup quarterback. Peter, we'll get to that in a second. we'll get to, but for Drew Pine, he's been the backup quarterback. He's been on campus for 3 years now. You know, he's been with Tommy Rees for that entire time. There needs to be a game plan that they can put together that will accentuate his strengths and allow the offense to be successful. I mean, they don't have their ceiling, right? And frankly, they would, with the way the offensive line is playing, they didn't have their ceiling anyway. But the one thing I would say is, you know, last year they had, you know, Jack Cohn looked not viable as a Notre Dame starter for the first 4 or 5 weeks. And then suddenly he was able to turn it around, you know. Now Notre Dame can't allow it to happen in week 7 after a bye. It has to happen now. And that's a challenge for everyone, but we have seen it happen where, you know, what we thought we knew about a Notre Dame quarterback, it ended up we did not know. You know, he turned out to be a better player. I guess we'll address this from Peter Davitsu. Or Davistu on Power Hour. Mike mentioned that Keith Slovis would have transferred to Notre Dame if they wanted him. Can we expand on that?
Yeah, I think they could have got him. I mean, it's not 100%, but I definitely think they had contacted him and they were interested in him. But you know, they were also kind of weighing, you know, what that transfer would mean, and for Buchner and for Pine, you know, and how that would play out, and you know, developing those guys as well, and you know, what would it mean in terms of maybe those guys potentially transferring and stuff. And I think in hindsight, I mean, obviously you would have taken Slovis, right?
Yeah.
But I think, you know, you can see their reasoning why they didn't really push there. But I mean, it's kind of the risk you take. It's like a risk reward because, you know, you have a view of where you think Buchner can be and what he can become. And if you do that, you know, you risk maybe losing him or not having him. And now it's easy to say because he's hurt, but it's, you know, it's easy to say because they're 0-2, but
right.
It's, you know, probably a different answer if you're looking at it back then.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said. I mean, because you're assuming a lot of things. Like, let's say they go after Slovis. Does Buchner stay? Does he leave? And then you're in the same position if something happens to Keaton Slovis. You know, Keaton Slovis could very easily get hurt, and then you're in the same spot. You know, so we don't. It's kind of like you go back in time and it's like, yeah, we wish Keaton Slovis was on the roster and Tyler Buchner was his backup, but we don't know that would have been the case.
It's the old Notre Dame should have took Tommy Shoot or whatever, the guy from Ohio State, from back in the day. Like, oh, look at the depth of D-tackle. They should have. Well, that guy never even played at Ohio State, right? But it's one of those hypotheticals that people always pointed to at the time, and they should have done this, and maybe they should have, but that's not what happened. And I mean, there's nothing you can do now, right? Yeah. And it's long gone.
Peter, you're the best. You're the best, Peter. Thank you for tuning in. All of you are the best for tuning in.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah. Let's see. Someone agrees with me, so I'm going to put up that comment. I don't know what he agrees with. I haven't read the whole thing. I agree with Gray that they should run a similar offense to Marshall, but the line has to play better in order for that to happen. And that would make Chris Tyree, Kalen LeBourne. So let me tell you something. We got some stuff in the hopper right now. We're going to throw up some video clips, and we're going to talk about how Notre Dame can play more like Marshall. That's how I think that it can happen. And I think that Marshall had a perfect game plan for what Notre Dame was doing. And basically just don't run into bad numbers. So we're going to get into that in a second. But I do want to talk about what Marcus Freeman said today that I thought was correct. And I think fans and the two of us even need to have a reality check, because I was thinking about it. You know, there's been a lot of references to the Toledo game in the last, 48 hours or whatever it is. And we do need to admit Notre Dame was a lot closer to starting 0-2 last year.
Very close.
Given the way those games played out, the chances of Notre Dame ending those two games 2-0 are probably lower than they were if they were going to be 0-2, right? The kid for Toledo, DeCon Finn, if he goes down at the 1, if he slides at the 1, goes out of bounds, they will run the clock out and they will kick a field goal with no time on the clock and they will win the game. Okay. Most likely, right? That is a fact. Jack Cohn doesn't even get a chance, right? You're going in overtime against Florida State. You are you're in harm's way when that happens, right? You fluke here, a fluke there. You win on a field goal. Notre Dame was on the way to losing against Virginia Tech. You're down 8 points with 3 minutes left. Your quarterback just gets hurt. Jack Cohn, who had gotten pulled, has to come in and save the team. The likelihood of Notre Dame winning that game has to be in the 20th percentile, if not less than that, right?
Yeah.
So with the reality check is I think we all thought, well, they find a way to win these games and they're always going to find a way to win these games. And they're an 11-1 team and they're an 11-1 program. And that's what they are. And I think we do need to realize that Notre Dame showed us last year that they are a lot closer to being a 9-3 type team, an 8-4 type team than they were 11-1 team. And I think that's the reality check that we're coming into right now. Okay. Now I to be clear that I did not acknowledge that all off season. Okay. Just put my hand up on that. Did not see it coming, but the facts are the facts, right? They have started 0-2. I think they deserve to be 0-2, frankly. I mean, obviously they deserve to lose to Ohio State. I think they deserve to lose the Marshall game. It was not a fluke. They did not outplay Marshall, but for X things. That is not what happened. Notre Dame has 5 red zone possessions in the first 8 quarters. Okay. It's not good football.
Pretty terrible.
It's not good. Okay. So I guess, Jamie, what do you think about that? And then we'll get into some of this these breakdown things of what Notre Dame has done wrong, what they need to do better, and then how they can take a cue from Marshall.
Well, I think if you look at what Notre Dame has done wrong, I think they misevaluated some of their own talent on their team.
For the second year in a row, by the way, to start the season.
Yeah, I think so. That from that standpoint, I think they made mistakes there. Like, I think they had to do whatever it took to get more veteran receivers in the portal. They didn't. And I think that was something that we all knew could have bit them before. And they've had similar situations before where in recent memory, right? Like defensive tackle 2017, it was Jerry Tillery and Jonathan Bonner. And that's it. And then it was true freshman MTA. And that's it. Like Heinisch wasn't even really in the rotation then. So, and then even in 2018, it was still pretty dire after MTA got her because Jason Adelola played as a freshman and he really wasn't really ready. You know what I mean? So they've had some situations at certain positions. They've certainly had like cornerback 2020, wide receiver 2020. Like things could have been horrific there and it ended up working out. And so I think if you look at it from that perspective, you look at last year too, where like, imagine if they didn't take Jack Cohn and they were smart and they did take it. But if they didn't, I mean, first of all, Brian Kelly's not leaving Notre Dame. They're probably, I don't know what the record is, but it's not 11-2, right? That's not the final record. So, there's all these other factors into it that play into it that personnel wise, I think they did a poor job evaluating their own personnel and addressing some of those needs. And I understand it's hard to get transfers in, but they just had to. They needed to, and they didn't. And so I think that's part of it. And I think that one thing you can say, second year in a row, because they've misevaluated the personnel and not just being able to add to too, you misevaluated how good you were going to be up front on both sides of the ball. and what you could do with your talent up front. So when you look at it from that equation, you need to know what you're good at and what your strengths and what your weaknesses are.
Yeah.
And I don't think they had a good idea of that. And maybe because they played Ohio State first, it kind of gave them maybe a false sense of like, I think I thought Marcus Freeman was spot on today during the press conference where he said before we were talking about, oh, we're just finishing, and they weren't concentrating on the other things that really were there that were, leading up to it on a play-by-play and execution basis that wasn't leading him, that's the emphasis shouldn't have been on finishing. The emphasis should have been on like, well, we're not good at this. We have to get better. And the other part is we're not good at this. So what do we got to do to change what we do? And I think like for this game is an example, like Tommy Rees did a very poor job of knowing what would be successful against Marshall and adjusting to it way too late and then not doing it frequently enough when he did. And those are big mistakes. And that's how you end up 0-2. And I think they kind of got lucky last year, like you mentioned with that 4-1. And I think at the time though, I do think we did recognize that they got lucky in that first half of the year to only have one loss heading into that bye week, right? And then they came out of that Virginia Tech game, and then the schedule got way easier, right, down the stretch, and they didn't play any tough teams at the end. So that's why things, obviously looked better. They dominated, and they were like one of the best teams in November, but a lot of that had to do with schedule. And I think it masked some of the other things, and that's why, it's fair enough. You just thought, well, they figured out something here, and they figured this out. But reality is, they obviously didn't learn too much because, like at least from Reed's perspective, because I would say it's similar mistakes to what at the beginning of last year for the offense.
Yeah. So let's see. I think I got this figured out, Jamie. Oh no, still not.
It's not working.
Well, that's fine. We'll deal with it. Okay, so we've got some stuff. We're going to show you some stuff about what Notre Dame was doing. So obviously, especially in contrast to what Marshall had going on, because Marshall, what they did was they never ran into numbers. When Marshall had they ran RPO all the time. When you had 5-on-5, when you had 6-on-6, they ran the ball. When they had less than that, when it was outnumbered, then they pull it and they throw it outside, right? And that was something Notre Dame did not do. And so, Jamie, I'm gonna let's see if I can pull this up here.
This is like my biggest pet peeve in the world, too. Like,
oh, what? Not
running when you're, yes, the whole thing of like taking what the defense gives you, whatever. Yeah, it's like, yeah, that's what it's all about, and that's how you create big plays. And
all right, so this is Notre Dame's first. This is a 2nd and 10 play. Okay, so this is 2nd and 10. Now, first of all, Notre Dame in this game, in the first, they had four 2nd and longs in the first quarter. They ran into all of them. Okay, and in every single one, Marshall did the same thing. They brought numbers off the edge. Right here, you have 8 in the box. Okay, you have 3 across, all at about 10 yards, and Notre Dame sees this here. You have an off player. You have an off player. Okay, so what does Notre Dame do? Now, we can't show the play because it's a copyright thing or whatever, so that's why it's a still shot. But so they're going to bring numbers off the edge. Notre Dame is going to bring Michael Mayer across, and they're just going to try to kick out, and Mayer's going to lead up against. But you have free rushers. And not only that, you have this safety who is moving over with Mayer. Yeah. He is around 7 or 8 yards. He is involved in this. Any run play he is going to be involved in. They run into this. Now, it is very easy for me to see, pull this ball, fake it, quick slant right here, or do it on top, quick slant. Yeah. That is the type of way that you combat this sort of thing. Notre Dame continues to run into 8 players. And when I was thinking during the game, and I didn't want to say it because it seemed mean, but it's like Notre Dame needs to stop pretending that they have the 2017 line. And they continue to do it, and they continue to call plays as if they are a dominant offensive line when they are not right now. Comments?
Okay, well, so for anyone who knows kind of my background, my dad was a longtime high school football coach, right?
Yeah.
Coached for 30 years. He had Hall of Fame high school football coach, very, very successful, won a bunch of championships. And, so very early on in what I learned about football is it is on offense to be successful. It is a numbers game. I mean, everything is a numbers game. When you hear about anything, it's like, well, what are you we're going to send more guys than they can block on this side. That's numbers, right? We have more guys. We have even numbers with them. We're going to run it because if we block them all, we got an extra guy to run here, right? All of this stuff, or you run unbalanced, so you get a numbers edge. You have an extra gap that they have to worry about, and if they don't get in that gap and they don't play that gap, then you're going to run on them, right? Like, so all of these kind of things are just like, to me, it is so basic. Yeah. And I think this happens a lot where, and I'm not saying this is what Tommy Rees, I'm talking about offensive guys in general. They fall in love with scheme and trying to be impressive with certain things, or we can do this, or we should be able to do this. And it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. It's not even going to work like that. I don't care that it's Marshall too, right? Like when they have more guys than you in a thing and they're bringing extra, you're asking your guys to do something that's not in their favor, right? That's going to be a loss for you most of the time, right? So this play, for example, and I know we'll go into it, but like, okay, you see the one safety at the top, right? He's creeping down. That guy's moving over to that side, but that safety's creeping down, right? Throw the screen here. Like, check to the screen. They do like a million check with me's, and yet somehow they didn't get like some kind of simple play like this. Or even if you want to just throw this check to the boundary, you can still get free yards. You're not going to get a big play probably, but you can still get free yards.
At least it's a one-on-one play, because again, 2nd and 10, and this, the context behind this one, this is the 4th straight time that it was 2nd and long. Notre Dame runs the ball and they bring pressure.
2nd and long again. Also too. It's just a dumb call.
It's a dumb call. You should not run the ball on 2nd and long, period. Okay. It's not a good time to do it. Okay. That every stat analytic will show you, like, don't run on 2nd and long. They do it anyway. You especially don't do it when you have 5 to block 7.
Yes.
Never working. They bring this guy off the edge. They bring this guy off the edge. This play is never going. It has no chance to work. Okay. No. The only way it works is if the back makes some miracle play, breaks a couple of tackles, and gets outside. Okay.
Yeah.
So that they bring him here. You are going to have double bubble option. Okay.
Yeah.
When you see this and the safety's creeping, it's not like they disguise it really well. The safety is creeping. This guy is definitely coming in here. This ball, you get it and you throw it out here. You make one guy miss.
And one guy miss, it's 6 points.
Off to the races. You're off to the races.
Yeah.
And you're at least giving yourself a chance. Now, the question is, right, that everyone has is this a Buchner mistake or is it the call? And my hypothesis is that it's the call, because this is so textbook. The only reason that you have this option up here is so when you get this look, when it's just a huge blitz with a single high safety, this is zero cover right now.
Yeah, it's zero cover.
And when you get this look, that's when you throw it out there. To not do it is like, you need to pull him. If he's not throwing this ball, you need to get the quarterback out of the game, because he cannot execute the most basic parts of the game plan. So I think he has to give. I don't think he has an option.
And the other thing is those guys ran like they were going to expect the ball, right? That's
right. Yeah.
So it wasn't like that, but you could do check to some kind of stack release there. Like there's a lot of stuff you could have done in that situation. And I mean, Notre Dame literally chose the worst of the options. So yes, that's an infuriating type of call. It is. It really is.
I just can't. Like I don't understand.
If you know what, and I would say maybe that's Buchner. He's an inexperienced quarterback, whatever. But like you said, that is either if he doesn't know that, then it's like, and he doesn't have the freedom to check to that, then that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
And if you're running check with me's and you're not checking to that, that's an even bigger problem. So, I mean, you can write, like, I see people are just like complaining with the offensive line. All that stuff is totally true with the offensive line. That is 100% true. But even with your O-line can be playing bad. And Notre Dame has played team with bad O-line where their D-line is kicking the snot out of the other team's O-line. But they can still move the ball because they're not dumb enough to run into like two more guys than you got to block. Like, and that is dumb. I mean, it's straight up stupid. So like, I don't even know what to say. So it's like, you can even say like, you can rip on Harry Stand, you can say all these kind of things, but it's like, if that isn't part of your package to get out of that, then you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. And you're hurting your players and not allowing them to be successful.
You have to be able to get out of it. Look, every team does this. Marshall did it against us. That's how they won the game. It's like they knew we're never running into numbers. That was just the whole thing. So you can't say, "Oh, it's too hard to teach it." No, it isn't. You have to teach it. It's a simple concept. It's like anything else. It's reading if you can't, it's same thing as reading the defense. If you're asking your quarterback to go through multiple progressions, then he can do this. That's the same concept as reading out how the defense works post-snap, right? You can make a pre-snap read just the same as a post-snap read. Now this is the pass play, the shot play where they bring Lindsey across. They do a roll with Buchner. I like the play call. And this is where, like, I think the passing game especially is there's a lot going wrong right now. Like, Buchner doesn't make a great throw on this.
No, it wasn't a great throw.
I don't think the routes are very good, and I'll explain why. Okay, so we have Lindsey's coming here. I can actually draw on this one. I'm very excited. So Lindsey comes here, and he's running either a drag or a post, right?
Yeah.
When he gets to this spot, he doesn't give like a stick as if he's selling the go or any sort of like anything other than I'm definitely coming across.
Yeah, it's just it wasn't a good route. Yeah.
Right. He just kind of bends it and he never threatens anything else except that. Not just that, but this defensive back who's covering him turns his back here and then he runs underneath him. What that does is it comes underneath, okay? That flattens out the route. That means that he brings this player into play. Okay. This defender, I'm going to put him in a different color now. Oops. There we go. This defender is not threatened because you have Mayer who comes across this way. He is picked up by this safety. There is no threat out here for this player other than I think Bauman who comes out here, but he's sinking backwards. So now this defender is into play because Lindsey has gone all the way across. He hasn't gone vertical, which means the pass is now angled towards the sideline. The other part of
which makes it a much harder throw for Buchner too.
Right. Yes. Right. Because then you're leading him into the sideline, right?
Yeah.
In my opinion, you either want to go on top of it so he can put air under it and throw away from the defender, or you need to give him a stick and go like a completely around. The other part of this too is Jaden Thomas. They're going to invert. Jaden Thomas is going to have a goal route out here. Now, again, Jaden Thomas runs outside of this defender towards the sideline. So Buchner does like a play action fake and a roll right here. Because he goes outside of the defender, this ball has nowhere to go. He can only lead him out of bounds. There is no chance of it.
So it's a very difficult throw to make.
Right. Give a hard pivot, fake him out here, and then cut inside of the defender so that Buchner can lead the ball out to this area here. Okay. And then you have Mayer on a drag who's covered. In my opinion, the easier throw should go to Thomas, but because Thomas goes outside of him, he makes it
a harder
impossible. Throw. It's just like it's a non-starter at that point. And on this play, Corral gets beat here, and Buchner, as he gets hit, as he throws, gets hit in the face. And that's just like part of the problem. Like when I talked about the in the post game, like the lack of execution and that sort of thing. This is what I'm talking about. Like, I just think the whole play is executed in a poor way, right?
Yeah.
I don't think you have very good routes. You don't have a good throw by the quarterback. Corral gets beaten, and then the quarterback takes a shot right in the face as he throws the ball. The level of play is just so I guess the word I'm looking for is mid, right? It's just all kind of
it's
just not like a high level of play right there.
Yeah. And I think you can, with the Jaden Thomas, who's basically playing his second college football game, you can understand it.
Right.
And Marcus Freeman did bring up that Braden Lenzy is playing more than he ever has. It's true. He is playing more than he ever has. And yet he has still been in the program for a long time. And I know it's a new coach and there's all this kind of stuff, but like, he's a very fast player.
Mm-hmm.
And yet he fails to gain separation on a lot of things. And I think it's because he it's just like releases. There's no subtlety to anything he does as a route runner that stands out for him to gain separation. Or like even on those fades where those 50-50 balls, I mean, those are losing propositions for Notre Dame to throw 50-50 balls to Lenzy. He hasn't shown that he can be a guy. And obviously that's something that, goes without saying, but like him getting widened out and I thought, so yeah, you mentioned Greg, you muted the telecast, but Garrett, I think actually was, first of all, if you're talking about comparing him to some of the other guys, the difference between him and like Drew Brees, I think was negligible. I don't think it was, he was much worse than whatever. I thought, some stuff, whatever, he sounded like a guy who's just doing it for the first time, but I thought he also brought some really good points, especially when it came to some of the receiver stuff and like Lenzy widening out his route and not giving Buchner a chance on some of those things. So like that 4th and 4, the fade, that's a right read by Buchner. It is the right read. That's a play there, but Lenzy widens out so to the point that, and he's got to fight through. So that, and I would say that's good corner play by Marshall, but he can't get that wide because if he gets that wide, like Buchner put it the only place that it could have been caught. But the problem is it was out of bounds, right? There was just no other place. So he can either throw it inside and it can get picked, or Lenzy can make some kind of ridiculous Chase Claypool over the top catch, which chances are that's not going to happen. So, and that's why that kind of stuff, those details, it matters. It really does matter.
Right. And here's the other end of the coin now. Okay. Because Marshall has the same problem as Notre Dame. Like, it's very hard for Marshall to block, right? So here we go. They have inside zone with RPO, right? We got a slant here. We got to go here, and we got I can't remember what route he's running, but they're all running routes. Okay, yeah. But look, they bring the player in motion. They have 6 to block 6, and not just that. You brought up a great point in Power Hour today, talking about how Notre Dame doesn't do anything to make it difficult for the offense as far as the front, right? This
No.
is all just standard formation, right?
Yeah.
You like
You play it straight up. They're
Yeah,
not
play it.
mixing up alignments. They're not slanting. I mean, they slant a little bit when they're playing 3 down, but I mean, that's a whole other story. But like, they aren't calling like stunts or anything like that. They like basically run like less than a handful of stunts all game, and it's like tackle stunts and whatever. Like, and basically in terms of run blitzes that they're doing with the inside backers, they run like that cross dog and that's it.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty much what they've shown.
Yeah.
So you make it so easy. Like that's too easy. And I understand they're doing a good job of not giving up certain things in the back end. And maybe they're just like worried about not giving up too much in the run game, not giving up a big play in the run game. But it's impossible to create havoc unless you just have Georgia dudes up front.
Yeah.
To just dominate. And Notre Dame doesn't have that. And honestly, in the game, the closest thing they have to that really is Howard Cross. And he's like, like Jalen Carter ate Howard Cross for breakfast. You know what I mean? He's much smaller than him, but he was the only guy who's really kind of able to kind of get that consistent kind of penetration for Notre Dame. So if they could have easily in this game, if they did a bit more, they had 8 tackles for loss in the game. That should have been double digits easy. And I'll give credit to Marshall's, O-line. These guys played hard, man. They played really hard. But
Notre Dame didn't win any one-on-one matchups.
They didn't, and you just make it so much easier when you just say they just know, oh, this guy's gap. He's knowing. I know that he's going to be here. All I have to do is kick him out, or all I have to do is block down. And instead of thinking like, oh, maybe this guy's slanting inside of me here, or whatever. There's none of that. So it just makes it too easy.
Right. So this play, it's like I said, it's inside zone. And basically you have block here, double team, scrape to the backer here. And then you have this player come in here and then lead up on the linebacker. And because the numbers are such that they are, right, you just give it inside. And this was a gain of 8.
Yeah.
Right. And look, the numbers are there. And eventually Notre Dame rallies and they make the tackle, but it's a gain of 8 on first down. And now you're in plus, you're ahead of the sticks. And that's how you build an offense, right? Yeah. And I'm gonna bring up another one in a second where the numbers switch and they pull it and they throw it out. And they did this all game. And why is Notre Dame not doing this?
I don't know.
That is the question where it's like, people ask about, how can Drew Pine, right? Like, how can Drew Pine succeed at Notre Dame? They can do this stuff. There's no reason that Notre Dame can't build this sort of offense for Drew Pine.
In fact, they did it last year. In the second half of last year, they ran a ton of RPOs. They were like pulling and throwing like 10 RPOs a game, and like were highly efficient running them. And that's one of the reasons that they were able to have success running the ball and throwing the ball short later on in the year, is because they did that. And that's why it's like, why did that go away?
Yeah.
Especially because you and I know we both felt the same. This was going to be a play action / RPO like offense. That's what it just made sense. And Tyler Buchner did a good job on RPOs last year. I thought he was really good with some of his decision making. So I don't get it. I don't get it.
I do have some concern that it's just not Reese. Like, he doesn't want to be that type of coach. He doesn't want to teach the RPO. I think he reluctantly does it. But that this is the second year in a row where you start the season.
You're in college football. This is
not a heavy part of the offense. I'm just saying, like it just, that's what it looks like, right? Like I don't know what to say. And this is the flip side of the coin. This is inside zone again. Okay, but look, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 against 5.
Yeah,
bad numbers. So what they're going to do is they're going to fake it here. Am I on the thing? Yeah. They're going to fake it here. Block, throw to this guy.
Yeah.
Okay. Now this player has to go win, right? He has to fight through the traffic and win. This is a gain of 7 on first down ahead of the sticks. Notre Dame can do this. Okay. And this is what Marshall did all game. Honestly, if Marshall had done this for the majority of the game, they win. They'll never get stopped. But they got stopped when they stopped doing this sort of thing, right? And then
they did stop doing it in the second half, and they called more. They called more runs that didn't have an RPO built in.
Yeah. So it's that's what kind of got them off schedule and that sort of thing, and then they went back to it, and we saw the 94-yard drive or whatever it was, right? Like you're just running at them, and you're because you have numbers, right? You play the numbers game, and that's how it was successful. But there's been a lot of questions here about the physical strength here. I'm just going to bring this one up, and that led to a couple. Do we blame our strength and conditioning coach too? Because I've never believed he's good at what he does. I don't believe that's true. The second part.
I don't. Yeah, I think people have. I think that's the opposite. I mean, of most people's opinion of him, and I think one of the things, if you look at Notre Dame, especially since the kind of reboot with Brian Kelly, and it's been the same guy, Matt Balis. I mean, it's even in the games they lost to Alabama, to Clemson, etc. In those games, they didn't get out physicaled. They got out skilled in those games. Now, I mean, you could say this year that they've been a bit out physicaled. I think that's fair. At the same time, I think, some of it is, and I was talking to Mike Frank off the air today after we recorded Power Hour, and just saying how they miss guys like Kurt Heinisch and Myron Tagovailoa-Amosa, because the level of consistency those guys brought in terms of their motor, and just how difficult it was to block them, and how those guys consistently won at the point of attack.
Yeah.
And while neither of those guys is an ultra talented athlete, they were both tough football players, technically sound football players. And I mean, I think, if you look at the difference between, and I think I look at Howard Cross, and he, to me, he's like a Heinisch in terms of his same mentality, a little quicker than Heinisch, but just same mentality. But smaller. But Jason Aruola is like more of a gap shooter. He's not that. He hasn't been that guy. I think, the edge guys that they had, like Dalen Hayes, was, even though he didn't live up to the kind of pass rush promise that people kind of thought, I mean, that dude could set the edge. He could really set the edge. And Foskey and Justin Aruola don't do that on a consistent basis. It's not the same. So,
So Brizex, you've asked this a couple of times, so I wanted to get it. So okay, practically, just objectively, the ceiling is 10-2, right? Because you lost twice. Personally, I think 8-4. I don't think you're going to beat Clemson. I don't think you're going to beat USC. I don't know that you can score. First of all, I don't know that they can score enough with USC. I don't like them to win against Clemson, because here's the thing. Clemson is the type of team where, and honestly, then this is a question that I have too. Clemson is the type of team where you almost can't, like playing the numbers almost doesn't work, because you try to run into Brazil and you try to run into Miles Murphy and those guys, and the number.
They can be outnumbered and they can just beat you.
They can be outnumbered and win. And that is a concern, that why can't Notre Dame be outnumbered and win against a team like Marshall, right? Notre Dame, like, look, and this is something that I don't really understand. Just like, why can't Notre Dame get to this point where if we play Alabama, or not even say if, when we play Alabama, when we play Clemson, when we play the Ohio State, okay, we lose those games. Notre Dame loses those games, and you think to yourself, well, they've got the dudes up front, and Notre Dame doesn't have the dudes up front, right? Alabama has Christian Barrymore. Big problem, right? Clemson has Christian Wilkins and Xavier Thomas.
Dexter
and
Lawrence.
Lawrence, Cleveland Farrell, all those guys, right? Too big a problem, right? That Notre Dame just can't get to that point, right? But then why isn't the flip side true? Why isn't the flip side true that it's like, well, Marshall, we had a good plan, but we don't have Isaiah Foskey, and they have Isaiah Foskey, and they have Jason Adamilola, and they have all those other teams. Like, and I don't think it's strength and conditioning. You know what I mean? Like,
no,
I
don't think so.
And so why is the gap so much bigger with the Bama guys and the Clemson guys and the Ohio State guys to where it's like Notre Dame against Marshall?
Yeah.
That's what I don't understand that.
Well, one, I think it's because of what you kind of brought up. It's people always think that it's all physical, like this guy got his butt kicked or whatever. And, there are some plays like that, right? Like someone mentioned too, like, I mean, Foskey's on the ground, like way too much. He's on the ground way too much. Like he's not helping his draft stock in these first couple games with how much he's on the ground. But like, so there's that part of the equation of it, right? And that's certainly like a thing. But also it's, on offense, it's running into bad numbers where you can do your job, but it doesn't matter because there's two unblocked guys that are there to hit Estime when he's, behind the line of scrimmage, right? And even on defense too, you could play and like do a pretty good job of like holding your gap, at the defensive line, and technically you might get a plus on the grade sheet when the defensive line coach is grading you. But when you don't have the extra numbers, so you're not setting another guy up to make that play, then you better be the guy to get off and make the tackle. And that's just obviously not happening. And they're not doing enough to I don't know if Notre Dame doesn't have these war daddies that can just dominate to the point where they're just going to just physically, beat the snot out of a lot of these guys. They have good players, but they're not guys who are of that caliber. That's why Notre Dame hasn't had first round defensive tackles or whatever. Like Jerry Tillery's an exception. And obviously when he played, he was a difference maker for Notre Dame, right? And Sheldon Day, even though he was undersized, I mean, the guy was exceptional, right? And even Jerron Jones was like to a certain extent too. But it's been a while since Notre Dame has had kind of dudes like that, and they haven't really had that. And when you don't have that, it's a lot harder to do. So you have to do a lot more stuff with like slanting, stunting, gap replacing, like just different things there to set your guys up for success. And if you don't do that, that's how you get like, they got 9.2% havoc rate on the year. I mean, it's bad. That's like, some of the worst in the country. That's not what you're looking for.
Yeah. So there's been a couple comments about Drew Pine regressing and that sort of thing. And I think Sean Kelly makes a good point. They all look like they've regressed. Notre Dame I don't think anyone on the team looks like a better player this year than they were last year, with the exception of Tariq Bracy, who I think is getting universal praise and that is deserved. But I think it's a true point. I think they're all underachieving right now. And that needs to obviously improve, right? So to everyone talking about like, Drew Pine and this sort of thing, no one looks good right now. I mean, I guess that Michael Mayer doesn't look worse, but it's just like,
Styles doesn't look worse. Yeah.
No,
but
Styles looks better. Right.
If only a handful of guys on your team are, that's not what you want. And then they don't have some of the other guys they lost.
I do think 6-6 is more likely, frankly, from what we've seen, right? Just guessing on market, like just steady improvement. I think that is more likely, to be honest. But I do think 8-4 is kind of like, if they finished 8-4, I think they did a real good coaching job, like to end the year.
I
frankly.
think this game is going to tell a lot,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
my opinion, because I think Cal, first of all, their offense is bad. They're 118th SP plus. It's not a good offense. They don't have they're not terrible up front, but they're definitely not dominant. They have a couple of good receivers. The quarterback is the same guy who was bad against Notre Dame starting for Purdue last year. And he had more talent to work with than on Cal. So if you're looking at it from that perspective, Notre Dame, they shouldn't score many points on Notre Dame. They shouldn't. And at the same time, their defense is like, it's top 25. They don't have any dominant pass rushers. That's probably their biggest thing, but they are just solid across the board. They're solid across the board. They, much like Notre Dame, they don't give up a lot of big plays. They're very consistently. Justin Wilcox and Sermon is their defense coordinator, and they've obviously worked together for years. Those guys that's what they do. They don't give up explosives. That's their main thing. They're very usually near the top of the country in not giving up those big plays. So they want you to drive the field and they want you to be efficient. And so can Notre Dame do that with Drew Pine? Can they make those correct choices? Like you said, all that kind of stuff, matters. And, I saw, like, I don't know I can't remember what the number is. It's like 9 points or whatever. It's about close to double digits, whatever what the point is. But in reality, on paper, if you're just looking at the totality of what Notre Dame should be in talent wise, Notre Dame should be, 2 touchdowns better at least than Cal.
Yeah.
But if Notre Dame, say, even if they win this game, but they win it by like a field goal or something like that, they'll feel better about themselves, whatever. But that to me is concerning, and that screams more 6-6 for Notre Dame. But if they come out and they start doing a lot of these things that we're mentioning, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, like they took it as a real wake-up call in terms of like coaching staff wise of what they're doing. And, some of these guys who were expected to be really good players for Notre Dame start playing up to that level. Then I think you could say 8-4, 9-3, it's on the table. It's on the table. But I think so. It's going to say a lot. It's going to say a lot.
Yeah. And, speaking of the defense too, like there's a lot there's not a lot of playmaking going on with the defense, right? The last 2 games, they've given up 21 and 19 points. The reason that we care about the 19 points, the reason that we care about the big drive that Marshall went on is because Notre Dame was only up 3. That's why we care.
Yeah.
The reason that Marshall can run for 200 yards against Notre Dame and that they can, dink and dunk their way to that is because Marshall's only down 3 going in the fourth quarter. The fourth quarter. 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter.
They're down double digits. They're throwing on that
Notre
drive,
Dame.
right?
Notre Dame. Yeah. Not only they're throwing, they've been throwing. They have to rip up their game plan. Marshall didn't score until I think Notre Dame had the ball 3 times. It was 3 or 4 times. If Notre Dame is up 21-0 before Marshall can get things going, they can't do all that RPO stuff. They have to get rid of it. They have to do more step drops, right? Like the defense gave up 9 points in the first half. Why is it not 28-9? Why is it not 24-9? Yeah. So like we only care about what happened at the end with the defense because it's not like it was 29-26. It's not like it was that where it's like you had that Marshall was consistently getting in the end zone against
anyone who says the defense was bad is completely overreacting. The defense was not even close to being bad. They were in fact, they were pretty good. I mean, pretty good isn't good enough, and there's a lot of things they need to work on.
Not dominant,
but not dominant at all. Not dominant at all.
Not causing turnovers. Certainly not helping the offense in terms of short fields and that sort of thing. right?
Although they did in the
although
first
they get
half.
a fourth down. I will say this: they
Yeah.
did get a fourth down stop, and that was at midfield, and that is essentially the same as a turnover, in my opinion. So there is that.
Here's so can you throw up that Westwood Manor's got that question?
Sure.
I'm speaking as someone who has played on my last year in college. I played on defense. That was pretty good. We had a good defensive line. Man, we had like just an all conference linebacker. We had solid DBs. We weren't like, no one special, but we were good. Our offense, specifically at quarterback, we were horrible. We were not. And when you play on it, and we knew we had to win every game, like 17-13 or whatever, right? Like basically that was how you're doing. And there were some games where we did win, games like that. And there was games where we lost 17-13, whatever, right? But like the defense played pretty well. But then there's definitely was like some games where you're like, I feel like we're never off the field. And that is something that mentally can break you. It is something there. At the same time, I think there was a lot of instances last year. And I think Isaiah Foskey was, when they needed a play last year, Isaiah Foskey was the guy who delivered them a play. And he hasn't been that guy. So they could use a lot of that too this year to help them out.
And to echo that sentiment, what happens a lot is the defense is it's you start to talk about it on the sideline. It's like we keep giving them the ball and they're not doing anything with it.
Yeah.
And it starts to get in your mind. Like you think it, like it's just like, God, we give them the ball and it's like we can't, we there's nothing we can do. Yeah. We get a stop. They go down and score. It's 15-12. We get a stop. And we have a good punt return. Let's go down and ice the game. Let's end it. And it doesn't happen. And then you start to feel like you get a little bit deflated. It's okay, we have to do one thing. And this is a great comment. And I'm gonna get to this in a second. So because I'm gonna finish this point, and then I'm gonna get to this. So what happens is you start to feel like you're blowing it. You start to feel like, oh my God, like we are like they're driving on us. If they're at midfield, they might as well be at the 5 because it's like, Jesus, they're driving, and you need someone to make a play, and everyone's kind of looking like, who's going to make the play? Who's going to make the play? And then you start to think, am I going to be the guy who blows it? Am I going to be the guy who doesn't do the right thing? And so it's just kind of like, and to Brendan's point here, G5 team, when you let them hang around, they begin to build confidence. The other team begins to falter and second guess. That is
look at what happened this weekend.
True. That is completely true.
Look at what happened with Texas A&M and App State, all those games. Yeah.
Because the thing is that the fact that it's even close is a loss. They're already embarrassed.
Yeah.
It's like, it's in your mind, like, man, we're only up 3. Like this is not good. This is really not good. And for Marshall, meanwhile, it's like, this is great. Like we are right where we want to be.
They're like, far start of the fourth quarter, even when Notre Dame goes up, they're like, we're down 3. Like, they're like, give it to us any day. Like, they're just like, we got a chance to win the game.
Yeah.
That's all they want, right?
And they're just chomping at the bit. They're chomping at the bit. And meanwhile, Notre Dame has the opposite reaction. Yeah. It's like, man, we need this.
This is why when all these people say momentum is not a thing, it is a thing. It is a thing. It is an actual thing that can really happen. And I think in those circumstances, it's like you see it in March Madness too. Same thing.
Yeah. We need to just get out of here. We need to
give people belief, and then that changes. And then if you doubt creeps into the other team's mind, that happens. Yeah.
Yep. That's a great point, Brendan. And it's we've seen it before. We saw it last year against Toledo. The Toledo won the game, like we said, and the guy went in the end zone when he should have gone down at the 1, and it's we've seen it before. So that's how these things happen, and Notre Dame has to find a way to become a better football team, right? It starts, I think, this weekend, and I think Marcus Freeman talked about how I think that he mentioned like the pressure of having to put them away and thinking about the end result when it's like we just need to focus on the play to play. It's got to be a play to play thing.
It's like going up in the US Open and you got you got a 2-stroke lead and you got a 3-putt for a win.
Yeah.
I mean, that's real. That's a real thing and you've seen guys blow it. And that's something when that's why you'd much rather have the 5-stroke lead going into that final hole, right? That's just one of those things. So it's just, and right now the team isn't good enough. That's why the team desperately needs some good mojo to happen early in the game.
Yeah.
For this thing. And like, they need, I don't know, like scoop and score, kick return, something, whatever. Like, even if you look at which, that 2019 team won 11 games. If you recall that Stanford game, Notre Dame was not playing good there. And remember, for years, Kelly sucked at Stanford. Couldn't beat Stanford. Even when Notre Dame had the better team. It was that Foskey punt block that flipped things. And that's kind of, what can happen.
Yep. Someone needs to make a play. So I think that should do it for today, Jamie. We are going to come back, I think, on Thursday, and we're going to do kind of like a Cal preview and talk about that. We're going to do, different things. I'm going to be doing some different videos and that sort of thing. You're going to want to look out for that. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. As always, hit subscribe button, hit the like button. Stay tuned in irishsportsdaily.com. You're going to want to go check out. There was an update about Jeremiah Love that I think everyone should read. I think that Jamie's got some stuff coming out. More. What articles do you have coming out, Jamie?
I got a film piece on Marshall, but I was thinking about nuking it because I think almost like people when it's a loss like this, it's like it's almost
Just
like
ready to move on.
But I will have a Cal preview. I got 6 thoughts on a Thursday. Obviously, we got our stuff. I got another show that
Wednesday
I'm doing on Wednesday night with Mike
and
all that. Yeah. So
all right, stay tuned in with us. Subscribe, like the show. Catch us on Thursday, right around the same time, 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific. All right, guys, have a good rest of the day, and we will talk to you on Thursday.